Hello all, I'm Rajesh Shankar. Welcome to one and all to India's first virtual conference. So today we are here to discuss on the digitization of the legal systems, dawn of the new era. So that's the topic. So I should say that the digital journey of the legal system has been happening for a period of time in this country, but it was at a slow pace. But as we speak today, there are quite a few enablers, what we did not have earlier. Today, we have the access to the right technology. We have the availability of the necessary hardware, softwares, application, tools, apps, whatever you call it. And we have fast data, and we also have cheap data. So I think this has really set the landscape for a digital revolution in this country. And particularly these times are very trying times ever since this pandemic, COVID. Whatever it has brought down on us, we should also see that, we have also adapted to the digital way of working. So, as they say that, during the worst of crisis, opens up the greatest of opportunities as well. So in that way, I should say this COVID-19 has also opened up a lot of opportunities for the digital way of working. So to discuss more on this subject, we have a distinguished panel of speakers from different sectoral and diversified backgrounds. And it is my privilege to introduce them to you. So we have with us today Aditi Chopra, who's a commercial developer legal lead for Microsoft. We have Amber Gupta, who's the head legal and company secretary of Aditya Birla Sun Life Insurance. We have Samichuk, who's the general counsel, director legal and regulatory of Bharti Airtel. We have Sanjit Kaur Batra, who's the legal head, South Asia and APAC counsel for DuPont. And we have Dr. S.P. Mitra, who is the Executive Director, Law and HR for GAIL India Limited. So now we will move on to the discussion. I have pointed out, 5 topics that we could discuss in this subject today. I think I would start with Samir. Hi, Samir.
Hi, good afternoon.
Yeah. So the first topic for this panel would be that how prepared is the Indian ecosystem for the digital transformation of legal function, particularly from the perspective of the judiciary, the government regulators, the statutory authorities, and the law enforcement, because these are certain dependables.
So thank you, Rajesh. It's a pleasure to be here, and of course, kind of in the, along with the other distinguished panelists here. So absolutely, kind of delighted, and I think it'll make for a good conversation. I'm going to request the others to also step in as they feel, and if they don't agree with me, I mean, please step in and say so. See, to me, I think, the first thing that comes to my mind when it comes to digitization and when you look at really from an Indian judicial system, whether it's the litigation courts, whether it's the regulators, I think necessity is the mother of all invention. I mean, that is something that we must remember. And while, digitization is a word that's been going on, and we've been talking about this for a long time. I think we've been talking about digital India. We've been talking about digitized world. We've been talking about, boundaryless places. Just the internet and the email coming in, way back was just the start. After that, it's been a long journey. It's been a continuous journey. Is it over? It's not. And therefore, from my perspective, I feel the Indian judiciary, the legal system, the government, the regulators, I think we still have a long way to go. Have we made some progress? I think we made tremendous progress, no doubt on that. But there is a lot to go. And the COVID-19, in fact, was in a way, while, it's obviously not the best thing to happen because it has turned around and turned the world turtle. But it is something that I think has turned around and helped in bringing all of this way forward. Think about it from the perspective, us having a debate like this. In fact, it's only after COVID-19 that I see these legal debates as well and other debates as well as other, kind of discussions happening in a digital world. Everybody's sitting in their own places and we're all connected, yet, pretty much having the same conversation. Earlier, it used to be those physical conferences where you just got together and, people would get on the stage, the others sit, and it would be like that. But if I were to see the two, it's still the same. I mean, that's how it goes on. But coming to the real topic, I think, what is digitization is where the big piece is. I mean, digitization is not just scanning papers or putting records of it together. I think it's a journey which starts from the fact that it enables you to really be truly, honestly, paperless. And you be able to access anything and everything from everywhere such that you don't need to be physically present to be able to complete what you need to. With that in mind, I mean, let's look at some of the simple pieces. When I look at the legal system, I think a legal system you can really put it, or what we really do from a legal perspective, you can put it into different buckets. Let's take, kind of how the corporate lawyers work. Let's take how the judiciary, which is the litigation piece, works. Let's take how the government, which is the regulators, as well as, other pieces work. And of course, the government and such agencies will need compliances, etc. Corporate lawyers, I mean, again, I think we were way forward in this and we kind of pretty much digitized the contracts much earlier. They are now stored into digitized databases. Aditi can talk about it much more. She kind of, comes from that side. But at the same time, all of that is there. How do we access it? I think that is something that is critical. While there are databases, companies have done a lot, but there are also the issues around the whole data privacy, the confidentiality, also the pieces in terms of how we turn around and actually take care of all of this information. Obviously, there are unscrupulous elements all over the place who will want to turn around and hack and get information which is valuable in terms of being able to monetize it from their perspective. So I think from a corporate world perspective, it's easy. Let's look at the courts per se. Now, courts is something that I think, Supreme Court, High Court, and kind of we deal with that on a daily basis, have done a pretty decent job of turning around and really being ready for digitization. Uh, Steps like the Supreme Court, the High Court, and various other courts also allowing e-filing is an extremely, kind of positive step. We now have hearings which are virtual hearings, and kind of some of the hearings I've seen have over 500 participants, and there are judges, and so everybody's on there. You do get a chance to turn around and actually argue. However, having said that, I think it is also about going beyond that. It is also about how you enable it further. The systems need to be foolproof. The systems need to be very stable. I mean, if you are conducting, say, a very critical hearing, then you cannot have a system which falls or fails in between. So you need to have what I would call as a fail-safe method, such that it works beautifully. To give you a simple pieces, uh, in a litigation situation, say from preparation of the documentation, when you say do an e-filing, they will still need to be able to, and I think that's where one of the big flaws I've seen in a lot of these hearings is, even after you do an e-filing, there's a printing that is done of all the papers, and I've seen those big files being put on the judge's table, and then kind of they reading out of that. Similarly, at this end, lawyers are also turning around and doing exactly the same. Is that digitization? The answer is partly yes. Is that full digitization? The answer is no. And I remember, kind of Delhi
Old
High Court.
habits die hard.
Sorry.
I said old habits die hard.
Oh, absolutely, and it will take time. So High Court did something very good, and I remember this. They had actually moved fully digitized, and they would not keep paper files anymore. In fact, there are a lot of judges which I saw, and I think I can safely name because I've seen it personally. Is Justice Ravindra Bhatt. He was actually turning around and scrolling and looking at the entire thing digitally. He did not pick up a piece of paper. I think that's really where we ought to go. Coming back to the point I was making, so obviously all those papers are done, and then you need to have stable connections. If you have a dedicated line, which also means that you need dedicated lines into each lawyer's house, which really moves us into the point about, while we have a digital broadband policy, but is that enough? In addition to really the broadband policy, you also need to then enable the infrastructure such that every new project, every new house or existing house is actually getting connected by fiber, and people have the ability to turn around and really get high speed connectivity. So that those are the kind of things as well that we need to think about. Then, again, I think from a digitization perspective, while it works well in certain cases, sometimes it is a challenge if the voice quality is not good. Your argument is not getting heard properly. If your argument is not getting heard properly, that's not where you want to be in a litigation. So that those are the kind of other issues that need to be seen. So I think as an Indian judiciary, I must say it's been a commendable job to turn around and put together what has been put together in a very short period of a few months. Are we really there? I think no, we are still far away. We still need a lot more to do. I think there are more systems, there are more processes, there are more, I would say, solutions that need to be developed, implemented, ensured that they run, completely without any glitches, etc. Uh, Taking me to the third point, and I kind of mix all of this, and I'll give you my broader view as well, is that if you look at the regulators, I think again, we heard a slew of things that got announced by the finance minister. Of course, the Ministry of Corporate Affairs turned around and also announced a lot of things. For example, you don't need to have physical AGM. You can do it through your entire, kind of e meetings, board meetings, all of those. I think fantastic stuff. We had our annual general meeting of the company. I mean, it went very well. Yes, there is a lot of preparation that happens, but that happens in the physical meeting as well. But it was actually very well conducted and it went very well. So it has been an absolute delight there. Similarly, I think while there are policies and they have announced some measures, but are regulators savvy about it today? I am not sure about that, and I think that's where there is a gap, and they need to work more. I still know for a fact that within the ministries, say within kind of and various other regulators, there are still paper files that move, and I have heard this from some people. I can't name them, saying that, oh, sorry, file has gone up, wo aane mein 2 दिन लगेंगे, so therefore we will have to wait for it to come. I thought digitization is what we wanted, right? So you should flick an email and then like you expect that maybe okay, I don't expect it in 2 hours, but obviously as a process it will kind of get looked and come back digitally. But if there is still a file system that is there, then we are probably not truly digitized. But at the same time, I think regulators also need to be then savvy about when you are moving to digitization, it needs change in two major things. One is the mindset, and the second is the systems. Uh, from a regulator perspective, I am not sure today both exist in the full intent that we would want it to be. Systems are yet to be put in place. I think they need to do a lot more. They are trying, full marks to them for that. But at the same time, I think there is a lot more to be done. Intent, I am not sure how that works, because I think I still see a lot of people preferring paper and preferring to be still doing it through the old system, and therefore kind of will need to change their mindset. So I mean, in a nutshell, if you see all of it, there is a lot of progress that's been made. I think there is a lot more to be done, and it is continuous. As I said, it's a continuous process. I think where we really need to also focus is not only system solutions. Now, the third is, and the larger piece is really the law, which is what I think if impacts all of us. Now, if you look at our data privacy law, you look at some of the other kind of rules, regulations. I think all of them are still very archaic, and they are still based on paper systems as opposed to digital systems, in the sense that with all of this, the risk, the issues, the concerns will grow. And like what we have been doing in the past, where our laws turn around and kind of really um, catch up later, I think now is the time for us to be ready to start really anticipating things and putting laws together. Now, for example, if I remember correctly, the last time I think the entire Data Protection Act really got amended was, if not I'm mistaken, about 2014 or so. There have been some very minor things, but nothing's really happened after that. We are sitting in 2020 today. So therefore, to that extent, obviously, we need to look at those pieces also. So therefore, some of the pieces in terms of how our laws are getting developed, how we are really looking at the real issues and then framing our laws and regulations, I think we are still far apart.
Right. Okay, that is, I mean, I think you have rounded it, well articulated the points from the perspective of corporates, judiciary, and regulators. I mean, I can't agree more that, yes, I think we have a lot more to do, but but the journey has
Yes,
really progressed to wherever it started from. And we could also
absolutely.
hear from the other panelists on your views.
No, I completely agree what Nico was Samir mentioned, and there are three dimensions to look at it. One, how corporates are looking at it. Second, how regulators are looking at it, and the third one is how the judicial systems which are looking at it. So the level of preparedness for all the threes are different levels. Some of the courts, like Sumit mentioned, are well prepared, but then you have a whole lot of consumer courts who are totally not equipped and face a lot of challenges. A lot of corporates are at different levels of maturity level in terms of digitization. But one thing which is very had common, including regulators, some of the regulators were well prepared, some of the regulators were not well prepared. But if you look at what has exactly happened is now digitization has become the number one agenda for all the organizations, whether it's government, whether it's semi-government, private. People are looking at it. It's become the first, requirement that people are looking at that area. And so now, by not by choice as such, you don't have any choice as such to not to move in that direction. So as the things will progress, I think that's how the things will move. Unfortunately, it has taken pandemic to kind of scenario for people to realize about it. And when it comes to legal department per se, I think contributed in contract management, litigation, and also in other allied advisory that you provided. An organization is looking in that direction. So my advice to all the people who are working in the legal department and the general counsel, head of legal at different level, one, they should proactively take this and can create a lot of value addition in your own processes and also in your organization, objective of moving into that direction.
Thank you. Thank you, Amber. So with that, I think I'll take the second topic with you, Amber.
Sorry, just one
Uh,
point there, Rajesh. This is sorry. Just I would want to hear from Aditi's perspective, given that she works, kind of in the sector that she does for digitization. I think it'd be a very interesting piece to hear. Sorry, but I just thought, it'd
No,
be a
absolutely. In fact, I muted myself to start giving my point of view, at least coming in from a tech company that deals with it. This is our bread and butter. So if you think about and I'm going to actually sum up a lot of what Amber was saying. He's saying similar themes to what we have seen, which is that one. Digital transformation is it's not just about the courts, it's not just about the regulators, it's not just about the in-house companies, but it's also about the people who have to deal with all these different aspects. So it's also about making sure that every employee that is part of a company that has to deal with the digital transformation journey is actually empowered to do so and is actually prepared to do so. So whenever we think about digital transformation, we think about the people as well, and we think about the process that revolves around it. And then comes in the technology that's the overlay for this piece. So it's been a very interesting journey for us. So, if I give you an example of, the law firms and how the law firms who've had, and for those of us who worked with law firms in the past, I mean, work from home was never an option. It would be like the taboo word we were not allowed to say. And now they are forced to work from home. So it's about how they're enabled to do their jobs and how they have to be in a position that their jobs and what is required from them as individuals is performed in a manner that aids, the outcomes that's required. And I think what we've really seen, and Sami, thank you for asking the question because I was ready with a lot of notes on this one, but sure, I'll bring them in my session as well. COVID has been an accelerator. And, digitization of courts has been tried. It's been tried with the Supreme Court. It's been tried with the High Court. Some regulators started it early. Some regulators, other laggards. Some ministries, still believe in having the paper stamp. Some ministries believe in putting out notices online first. So it's been very interesting to see how the government has also come forward with technology and with digital transformation. And COVID has actually forced it. So, I mean, I've been asked previously that, do you think COVID has, led to a gap somewhere? And I said, no, I think it's actually filled the gap and forced people to think about this gap that's been there for years and where India really needed to come forth. And, given the amount of data we have and the amount of, just the sheer amount of data that's generated out of this country, that gap, which was very glaring, has now, everybody started looking at it. And COVID has accelerated that journey for some people.
Thank you,
Rajesh,
Aditi. Well articulated. Yes, Mr. Mitra.
in fact, what Aditi and Amber and Mr. Chu have said, I have nothing much to add. But as you all know, that COVID crisis still deepening. and it has been disastrous to many, irrespective of the legal and non-legal functions. But but it has come with a lot of opportunities as well, as you mentioned. And the digital transformation journey has been triggered by none other than the COVID. In fact, if you look at the history, way back in 2005, that E-committee was formed and they have submitted a report for digital journey of the judiciary. But somehow the recommendations were very much apt. The action plans were laudable, but again there is a lack of will and in the implementation process. Yes, but the very rightly you pointed out that it has to be a comprehensive the
Absolutely.
setup. It is not to be seen in isolation,
Right.
and it is not limited to e-filing or for that matter e-appearance, because everybody has to be brought in the same platform. All stakeholders have to be on the same page before you decide to retrieve benefits out of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mitra. Uh, so I have compartmented this discussion into some three, four topics. So the second thing what I would like to discuss here is that what are the essential ingredients and the preparedness that is required for the digital transformation when it comes to corporate in-house counsels from the perspective of litigations, contracts, and compliances. So there are few companies which are already zipping past this journey, and there are few companies are still treading on that, and there are quite a few companies which are yet to begin. So I think I would start this discussion with Amber. Amber, what are your views?
I'll quote my own example when I took over as the head of legal with Birla in 2014. And since then, in last 6 years, we have done a tremendous transformation of the legal department when it comes to digitization. So all our litigation is completely end-to-end digital in terms of record management, contract management end-to-end from making till signature, execution, and record keeping. Similarly, compliance management is completely digital online in terms of certification and submission of information and all. We are also now ISO 27001 certified. Three of my processes are Six Sigma certified. So the reason I'm also mentioning is that as an organization or as a department, when you think of the step, you have to think really futuristic, and you have to see in the sector where you are operating and the scale that you are operating. The scale, for example, which I was operating, 1500 litigation, 400, 500 contracts in a year, daily 30, 40 queries used to come. And we have a very small team. So it was again a thought process which was leading to that. Okay, you need to adopt to certain things where you improve the productivity of the team, have a faster response, deal with so many audit issues, because there are so many audit issues happen. Regulators come and do audit. You have internal auditors who do come in audit. Document management and its record retrievability and presentation becomes very, very critical at all times. So in the scenarios, the preparation has to look into the scale that you are operating, the kind of people and the stakeholders whom we are dealing. For example, we deal with all India. We have all India dealing with so many states, so many lawyers, so many cases. So it's impossible to deal without you don't have a system. Similarly, in contracts, we have certain outsourcing contracts which are regulated by IADA, which has a different level of complexities in terms of approval from risk management committees and infosec into it, legal, the finance. We have a separate workflow to take care of those kinds of requirements so that all the processes are in place. The maker checker is in there. Manually, this is not possible. So putting into a digital system on a workflow, understanding the requirements of the stakeholders, the governance structure that you have been put in place. A lot of time, like we have fixed in the authorized signatory limits, which are now fit in the system itself. So beyond a particular value, contract will not go through unless it's signed by that particular signatory. So these are the controls that we could build in also as part of the digitization. And then you have the entire billing system of your advocates. How do you process their invoices? Then the another issue aspect of the dealing with the deposits that you do in the courts. There's stamp duty aspect. So there are many areas that you look at it. So as a department, when you started, you have to look at your problem area, what you're looking at it, the volumes that you are looking at it, what are the problem areas that you're looking at it, your stakeholders which are involved, the TAT management you are looking, and what is the end objective that you're looking at it. For example, we have created a Vision 2021 almost 3 years back. where we had made a blueprint of years in terms of how I'd like to see my own department next 3 years. And so that kind of vision as a head of legal or as a general counsel, you have to build in your team. There are people who are, initial first year, you had a lot of issues, a lot of problems, but then slowly, people have started falling into place and a lot of organization support also keep coming. And now we are now moving into area of machine learning and AI. So I think all these factors has to be well taken into factor. Being in financial services, of course, digitization is something that is always being built in the DNA of all the operations. So by default, you are being forced to adopt it, even if you don't want to, because that's the agenda the MD and CEO is driving for you. Your chief risk officer and your CRE, your risk committee is also talking about in these areas. And now with the government also and some of the courts also going into digitization, so you'll have to also adopt. So all these factors come into picture, and a kind of a business case study you may have to prepare whenever you need to implement few things. Talking with your vendors, the quality of vendors you are looking at it, what is your timeline that you're looking at it, what is the blueprint you are looking at it. So all those areas has to fix in one specific requirements. Like in our case also, I can give one practical example. ISO certifications and Six Sigma certification we have undertaken. The objective was only that teams should understand, how the process is critical, what are the areas that will go into, how digitization will help us, how it will reduce the timelines. So earlier my order compliance, for example, used to take a lot of time. The system was not. Now it's through a system. So within well on time, we are able to do the order compliance. So many things we have to manage at the court level, deposit, etc. And so many places we are filing appeals, and how you track, because it's a financial liability, and auditors at the end of the year or the quarter, they want a status update from you. Manually, it's impossible because you have a team which is spread across all over India. I have a 90-member team spread across all over India. So it's impossible for you without getting into these areas. So based on the scale, your area that you're working, the sector, your problem statement, some of these things you have to start up early in the bringing your business model or your operation model, and then start implementing it. Short-term goal, long-term goal, and if you have a vision of 3 to 5 years goal, it will really help.
Thank you. Thank you, Amber. Can we hear some of the views of the other panelists? Sanjit, would you like to?
Sure. Thank you, Rajesh. Yeah, so just a couple of things broadly, pretty much aligned with what Amber has been saying. But, from what I have experienced, the biggest preparation that we needed to do was just changing the mindset, and not changing the mindset of just the legal function, but making sure that, the management as well as all the other functions are aligned with the new processes that are being introduced. And of course, with the whole COVID situation, it's more of it has to be done. But pre-COVID, that was something which needed a lot of work in terms of making sure that the rest of the organization, who would also have to work on these legal technologies, understand what the process is, what is the requirement and the deliverables from their end. So that has been one of the biggest issues that we have had in terms of preparation. The second being a MNC which has presence in multiple countries, and we have for example, the same client which could be operating in different countries, the same customer. By client I mean a customer. So collaboration within the legal function globally to make sure systems speak to each other. Whatever digitization process is in South Asia, whether it can work in tandem with what is happening in US or EMEA, etc. So those would be the two big things from my perspective, which need to be factored into for the preparation for digitization.
I can contribute here as well, Rajesh.
Thank you. Yes, you panelists should contribute.
Sure. So I think I'm going to, do the slightly
Aditi.
inside-out perspective here regarding, given that we are the providers of the technology that will enable your legal departments as well. So I think for us, we are evangelists of our own technology, of course. So as a legal function itself, we have adopted a lot of the technology that's available for us. So if I were to give examples, our contracts have been digitized for a long time, and the digitization happens not only at the level of the signature, but all the way to the operations, where the contract then has to be put to signature, it has to be recognized, and then, the services are then, let's say, the meters start running for the cloud services. So for us, we've actually seen digitization at every layer of the contracting cycle, the billing cycle, what Amber said. So our systems are integrated to ensure that the law firms can bill in a certain manner. They are onboarded as vendors. So so the law firms also need to comply with the security and privacy standards that Microsoft would require. I think what I would actually like to call out is that, not only did we have this, bouquet of technology available for us, but as a legal team, we've actually internally worked, in India to see how we can create more self-help and de-lawyering, because, as volumes of work increase, as companies start to scale, it's either headcount or de-lawyering. And in today's COVID age, we know what the answer is going to be for that. The headcount is not going to be the first to come. So we've actually started working on how do you adopt technology towards creating a little more, enablement for the business and the clients around self-help and de-lawyering. And simple examples, like they don't need to come back to us every time they need to check, whether the standard terms need to be changed. The answer is no, and then there's your answer. They don't need to come back to us asking every time whether the letterheads need to be used, standard documents, where are they available. So we actually created an internal portal, which is just for India. And again, the reason I'm bringing this up is because, Sanjeev, you really talked about the mindset. And I think that
Right.
mindset starts as well with the legal team. And if we can evangelize the mindset of digital transformation, the business is already geared up to adopt it more than us. In fact, some surveys say that lawyers are the last to adopt technology. So if our mindset is geared to enable and empower the businesses using digital transformation and available technology, it's an easier conversation.
Thank you so much, Aditi. Well
Just
articulated.
one point I also wanted to add that when we talk about digitalization, it's not about only going paperless, but how you bring the entire process a seamless experience for the user end. So your cross-functional team, your stakeholders who are dealing with, they are onboarding the vendors, they are bringing a service provider. The functions needs to interact with the legal department. So how the overall experience it is, how the TAT you are monitoring, how faster you're able to close, and then also how you're monitoring the entire thing. A lot of time legal departments, once the contract is over, they are not much involved. So I think there is a value addition that you can bring, and that's what we have been doing. Like we have an automated reminders now doing when the contract is expiring 3 months before that. What are the main SLAs that the function needs to adhere to, which we negotiate at length and put in a document, and later on nobody monitors that, and then sometime in future becomes a event for dispute. So some that SLA monitoring process that we have put into our system. Then of course, what are the specific compliance management which are applicable to that? That has been also embedded in our system. So it's lot more of value addition that you can bring. Just not about digitization of your own department and getting paperless and scanning the documents and ensuring there's no physical. But through this, the entire area of user experience, as you yourself become a service provider to your organization, to your function, and to your cross-functional team, and you are in a much better position to do those value addition aspects in a more vibrant and a more what I say as a business enabler for the organization, and not only just somebody whose job is to complete documents.
So
Thank
just
you.
one point,
Yes,
Rajesh, I'd like to also add. I think, kind of
yes,
obviously absolutely agree with all of that was said. I think there is one more piece which we all as corporate, or in-house counsels as well, that we need to be looking at is how do you engage with your law firms? I think it's critical. One is what you do inward, also what you do outward. Because, I mean, the inward pieces have all been touched.
right,
At the same time, I think, I would say that for us to be able to really be fully functional from a digitized perspective, it is important for what I would call as our support system to also be there. So clearly the
right,
companies will do it. I think it's also important that the law firms start to really look at some of those pieces, because while on the corporate side, it's fairly easy because, a lot of it is in your hand. From a litigation perspective, and maybe where the compliance are also required to be, say, filed, etc. There is a third party involvement. Now, whether it is the relevant agency, or whether it's a law firm, or whether it's your, kind of arguing counsel or your senior counsel, all of that. I think important that the digitization also starts there and is done well. I think a lot of law firms have turned around and taken good steps. But I'll tell you one simple problem which needs to be then, kind of really looked at is, say, standardization of the kind of platforms that you interact or engage on. I mean, I'll tell you my biggest challenge, one of the things that I see. There are several law firms of ours who say we don't do anything except Teams. Some say we don't do anything except Zoom. Some say we don't do anything except Blue
I,
Jeans. Some say
I
this. I mean, it is a nightmare. Yeah. So I've got like 6 or 7 apps on my thing here, trying to
absolutely.
connect to each. And then when you're also trying to, put several parties together, let's give you another example, in a particular negotiation where there is us, there is our law firm, there is the other side, their law firm, there's another third party there. I mean, it is sometimes a big mess. Yeah. You're just trying to figure out a larger piece of it, trying to say, how do we all get together? And probably you'll spend lesser time trying to really get to the real meat. So I think it's also about not just, kind of at your end, but as an in-house law department, if you want to be fully digitized, I think it's important that the support system you have also ought to look at it that way, and they turn around and take those appropriate steps.
Rajesh,
Yes,
I would
yes,
like to pitch in. In fact, this happens to be my areas of interest, and I fully agree that uh, in fact there is a complete inertia on the part of the in-house councils to be a part of that digitization journey. In fact, we had implemented our ERP. I was a part of that ERP team way back in 2004 and 5. And despite our best efforts, we could not make legal department a part of that, a ERP, project. And finally, when I had taken over the legal department way back in 2010-11, then we decided that we must have a online legal management system. And that is what, as Amber said, that end to end, we have got two sets of software. One is for the litigation management system, that is for arbitration, conciliation, and your litigation, where each case we consider them as a vendor. And we have got the advocates on panel, they are also vendors, senior advocates on panel, they are the vendors, the government law officers, arbitrators, conciliators. And what happens, that each case we have mapped them with the in-house counsel, the law firms, the senior advocates, so on and so forth. So anything that happens, the responsibility remains with the in-house legal counsel to continuously update it. And they get the alert automatically.
right,
It is already inbuilt in the system, because we need to look after the legal cases on pan-India basis. And there are thousands of cases, because we are the pipeline.
right,
Now we have to lay the pipeline. There are thousands of RU cases also. We need to have a very robust system of cause list also, so that we can speak. In the morning, if I don't get an opportunity to identify the high stake cases and accordingly to speak to it will be a very difficult proposition to have control and monitor the legal functions. So this is one set I have. So I can, very easily retrieve how much expenditure I am incurring on each legal case, from the advocate's perspective,
right,
senior advocate's perspective, law firm's perspective, so on and so forth. This is one. Secondly, we have got the legal compliance cell also, because we are a listed company, as you understand. So there are, the earlier clause 49, now it is LODR. We are required to comply with provisions of the, legal compliance management and report back to the board on half-yearly basis. So earlier it was only a hard copy system. They used to give us the certificate, we used to compile the certificate, go back to the board. Now it is completely, we know that there are about 9,000 or 8,000 odd number that provisions are to be complied with. Because you know, the legal compliance is again dependent on two factors. One is the business verticals. Second, again, the geographical locations. So looking at them, we have identified what are the legal provisions are to be complied with. And against that provision, we have identified the user of the process department. So process owner will have to comply and give the confirmation so that it gets, otherwise it gets escalated to the HOD and then come to me. So it is a centralized software. We look after them properly. Point I'm trying to make, there is no other option but to move into that kind of activities. Now all our pleadings are digitized, all the important orders are digitized, so you can always retrieve within few seconds or so. You don't have to go back to the basta leke, you have to identify the documents and then to produce before the court. So things have been digitized in the interest of the organization and in the interest of the stakeholders as well.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mitra. So now with that, we'll go to the third topic, what I have to discuss is, so when we say digitization, we talk about a lot of security and privacy concerns. How ready we should be to deal with this digital journey, keeping in view with the existing laws, the future laws like the PDP, and also the last 2 years of a journey in the GDPR. I think I would start this discussion with Aditi.
Thank you, Rajesh. And I think privacy and security are topics which are just so relevant in today's day and age, and everything that we've talked about till now actually has this common thread of privacy and security that sit with it. And Samir, I know you mentioned that the IT Act's just not been amended. It was, I think, 2011 was actually the last amendment, and there have been, of course, different. They've come up with different guidelines under it. And 2015, we actually acknowledged that there was a need to amend the act given that cybersecurity is becoming critical. But I think as far as India is concerned, our journey has been very interesting. And I would say it's been extremely snail-paced. And now all of a sudden it's accelerated at a very fast speed on what needs to be done. It was not till maybe 2016 that, the corporates woke up to that GDPR is coming. We knew the EU directives were there, and Schrems had forced us to think about the privacy shield. And, there was, of course, the US very active in the privacy space. And we had some inherent, I would say implicit rights that we would exercise under the Constitution. But the GDPR conversation became really relevant in 2016. And the journey from 2016 to 18 became interesting because, India decided in 2017 with the Puttaswamy judgment to have the fundamental rights around privacy. And I would say that since then, 2017 to sitting in 2022, we've seen such a dramatic shift in privacy and, how privacy is looked at as a requirement, how it's looked at as a right, and how it's looked at as a need and a necessity, not just for corporates, but at some levels by individuals as well. And we've gone from no regulation to, I don't want to say over-regulation, that's taboo these days, but we now have an NPD draft, we have a non-personal data draft, we've had guidelines that are being looked at from intermediaries. Interesting changes are coming in the e-commerce law. So we've gone again, India is just seeing a very dynamic shift in the way things are. And what we find really interesting is that, the GDPR journey that the corporates took from 2016 to 2018 when it became applicable was quite overwhelming for some. And at the same time, we had many who said, well, we'll just wait and watch. Where is the extraterritorial jurisdiction? EU is not going to come and sue me. So we saw many different sides of how privacy was also looked at and GDPR was looked at. And interestingly, when the PDP bill, which is out now, it came, it's not just GDPR. So just the fact that you're GDPR compliant does not mean you will be PDP compliant. There are changes which are there in the PDP, which don't map directly to GDPR. I think GDPR is the trigger. And if you're, as a company, if you have GDPR compliance, which you weaved into your, into your design of your privacy thinking, you will still have to work on being PDP compliant. So it'll be interesting to see where PDP takes us. And, small examples. So, the fiber has always been consent. I mean, right from the IT Act, we've always seen consent as the principal form in which privacy and processing happens. But now India has gone and said, yeah, you need consent managers too. We looked at grounds for processing. GDPR had its own grounds of processing, 5, 6 of them, of course, consent and legitimate interest and etc., etc. But now PDP is not mapped to that. So the debate around legitimate purpose versus reasonable grounds and reasonable purposes under the PDP is going to be an interesting one to see. So I think what India is doing and what we're seeing the regulators do with privacy is an interesting mix of global regulation plus actually meeting what may be requirements for India. I mean, we are one of the largest population, we generate data. The IT sector is such a large contributor to the GDP. So, the whole mix has to come in. And then, of course, we have the global regulations. So, I mean, July, we heard Schrems 2 came in and the privacy shield got invalidated. And so a lot of Europe woke up to not having, adequate protection for transfer of data. Now, did it impact us in India? Probably not as much. But for some of the large corporates that do work and the ITS sector that does work, it was an impact. And they did have to overnight think about whether their data processing agreements need to be changed. Now, I mean, I think the other relevant conversation that comes is data security. And, we have, again, the IT Act says reasonable security practices, and we look at the ISO. But is that adequate? And is that, how do we look at encryption and decryption? How do we look at, so we have privacy by design. What about security by design? Is that a conversation that's happening? In the last 6 months, we've seen every large bank and every large corporate say that India is susceptible to phishing attacks. In fact, certain even issued an advisory. But where did that take us with the law? And those conversations are becoming relevant more and more today in the COVID environment, where again, like we've said, everybody's moved to technology. I mean, if you're not working with technology, your business are going to, the accelerated pace will not be the same. So these are conversations that are happening. India's readiness it's picking up. So, like I say, I think we went from minimalistic approach to a extremist approach, and we're still working in the extremist approach. And it's not just in privacy, it's in different regulations that we're seeing it. Was it needed? Probably. And is the pace fast enough for us? I don't know, as corporates, how we're going to achieve the level that's required. And, marrying the different regulations, marrying the different global environment that we're in. Every large company is working in a global environment today. So I think if I were to answer your question very simply, it's a journey, and there's going to be roadblocks, and there's going to be speed bumps, and there's going to be, different paths to take. But I think as a country, we are getting there, at least in acknowledging the large issues that need to be dealt with. And the regulators, I mean, MeitY is doing a wonderful job in picking these up now. Taking it to fruition is, it's happening. It's on the way.
Thank you, Aditi. Thanks for that perspective. From a Microsoft person, actually, you are the front runners who has actually begun the digital journey for the whole world, I should say. May I request the views of other panelists from
Yeah, so Rajesh, I just want to put in another perspective. And again, I think, this is just so absolutely agree with what Aditi said. But I think the other piece also is that while, the legal system is now trying to put this whole law and, rightly as Aditi said, there's so many things happening from really doing nothing. We are moving to, an extremist position. I think the fact is we are trying to put all of that, but in reality, and this is just my personal view here, that in reality, there is nothing called privacy today, given the fact that everything is out there available and everything is digitally. I mean, when you look at your phones, you look at your systems, everything. I mean, people have Facebook accounts, people have WhatsApp, people have all of that, Twitter, etc. Pretty much everything is out there. And I'm sure that once it's out there on the web, there is no hiding. I mean, it will come out somewhere or the other. So to that extent, I think the big challenge, and it's not just for India, India probably a little more given the fact that we're still trying to catch up with laws. I think this is going to be a challenge across the globe to turn around and really say, how do you protect something which is already so porous and so transparent? And therefore, to that extent, how do you really also deal with what I would call as a valid use versus a misuse of it? And I think that is a very thin line or a fine line that needs to be looked at in detail.
Yeah, absolutely agree with you, Samir. I mean, those those were the days when we used to see a lot of conventional frauds happening, and today we see a lot of high-tech frauds. Sometimes, we take time to decipher, how this has happened. It takes time even for us. So I think it's all absolutely agree. I think it's more the responsibility of the people also. What are the things that you should bring into the public domain, and when it comes to security, what are the things you need to really secure that? I think that is everybody's responsibility also here.
True, true.
Completely agree with you.
Absolutely.
If you see the new Consumer Protection Act, which got just notified on 20th July,
Yeah.
and I was going through the definition of unfair practice, and one of the things that they added is that disclosure of any confidential information of a customer with a third party, that will be also considered an unfair practice. So that is a kind of the exposure that most of us as a legal counsel will have to deal with, because if it is there in the Consumer Protection Act, which is one of the most you can say least less complicated kind of thing, and which can be used by anyone in the country to seek the judicial remedy, legal remedy. I think it definitely calls upon a great attention in this area. Again, coming back to financial services, it's all based on information. It's everything is like telecom and all that. It's all about information, nothing else. So that calls double responsibility, of course, on the organization, but as a legal head or as a legal counsel or a legal department, responsibility doubles up, because one, you have to protect yourself from a regulatory action. At the same time, you have to also ensure that your data remains completely protected, and you end up signing a lot of covenants with a lot of multinationals like Microsoft, with large organization like MX, whom we process a lot of data, and sometimes we are subject to like a data processors. And then how do you protect that in your own process in the system, and what kind of legal covenants you are going to sign? For example, it has taken me 2 years to discuss with IBM and agree on certain obligations on GDPR, which they are trying to impose on us, because we were doing certain insurance for their employees. And of course, we took a lot of hard stand, and somehow we agreed on middle ground. But I know that it's very difficult to convince a lot of foreign players whom you are dealing with, because they are looking at GDPR now as a essential requirement. It's not something just a sign off box or a tick box. It is a very, very critical aspect. Our own company with the Vodafone, when we are dealing and we do some, they have put those clauses in our reviews, and so a lot of challenges are there into this area. So as a legal counsel, question is that how do you balance it? So there is not ready to that level. They're still coming up. PDP bill has not yet got notified, and though there are sectoral laws like in insurance and banking, certain aspects in Companies Act, Information Technology Act 72A, and etc. They are already there to ensure that you maintain confidentiality. But GDPR has already notified your clients to deal with that. Your organization has not come to that level. You are there somewhere, but not that level. Then how do you ensure compliance? So it's a very a very critical areas to look at it, and a lot of things gets. I can tell you a lot of things gets landed at the legal desk, because, for example, you are doing a big contract with a large multinational. Everything is closed, everything is sorted. Now you are stuck on the data privacy compliance. There are convenience, there are obligation, there are representation, they are asking you to comply with this. You are not in a position to do that. And it's very important for you to sign that contract. I gave my example in IBM. It's a large deal. It's an essential thing for them to agree. You can't agree to that. You know that I have to do that, but the organization's process is not matured. We are still coming up that. Then how do you sort that? The management feel that contract is not happening because legal department is creating problem. My services is not started. We are losing business. So these are the things that you have to look at it very carefully. Start engaging with the key functions. Explain them the scenarios. If they are signing off, you know what are the repercussions are there. You have your controls in place. Thankfully, in our case, for example, we are ISO 27001 certified in IS security procedures. But then again, some of these procedures are not 100% compliant with what GDPR is going to say that. So how do you do the entire balancing? Well, it will be interesting to see that. And as a counsel, how do you advise the business in these directions, so that both the interest of your business plus your customers are very well protected. Another area in terms of cloud security. A lot of regulators have big issue in terms of saving the data on your cloud. For example, in insurance, regulators don't allow you to save data outside India. So another big area. So if you are, for example, if you're we are opting for one big outsourcing contract, we have a customer, we have a technology, but their server is outside India. Now, I mean, your entire deal gets stuck because IID regulations don't permit you. Companies Act does permit that you can keep a copy. RBI regulations are different. How do you deal with the entire scenario? So, I mean, not only just privacy, but the entire gamut in which you are operating and how you're going to deal. It's something very, really interesting and very, very complicated. And you need to really be updated what's happening in the market and well training and well educating the people who are dealing with you.
Thank you, Amber. I mean, I know these are very interesting topics. Like, I think there are a lot of perspectives there, and we could discuss. But I think we have very little time ahead. So I thought, it's important that we should have this question with us. The next topic I want to discuss is that what, in your view, would be the most effective area in legal system for deployment of this artificial intelligence, machine learning, or blockchain tools? Whether this would be more effective in the pre-dispute resolutions or contract lifecycle management or connected compliances or everything. I think I would like to place this question with Sanjit Korbatra.
Thank you, Rajesh. And a one-word answer would be everything. Wherever digitization can happen, I don't think digitization can replace a attorney's judgment or any of the strategic advice that has to be given. But wherever it's more of a automated process, when it comes to maintaining timelines or having standard templates, contract management systems, pre-litigation, or even just the whole process of corporate governance, we have personally found it extremely helpful to have digitization in all these various buckets. And also one thing which has been helpful and it helps in career progression. So, for example, when you have middle level or senior level attorneys in the team, it is just helpful to have a system, a digitization process in place, which can do the basic standard work, and where the attorneys can devote more time on strategic initiatives, negotiations, or just proper litigation. So those would be my broad areas. But compliance system in particular has transformed the way we have handled corporate governance, especially with all the issues that and the liabilities of the directors. Whatever is happening in the organization, how directors are now liable for whatever is happening in the organization. So compliance digitization is something which has become critical, I think, not just in listed companies but also in unlisted companies, where the board can easily review what is happening across various offices, various manufacturing sites, etc. And especially in industries like us, where we have multiple businesses, and many of them are highly regulated, whether it's the biotech industry or the food industry or the pharma industry. It becomes extremely important to make sure that they're complying with everything, and the board has oversight of what exactly is transpiring. For contracts and litigation, where it has been very good for the organization is, again, because it helps various geographies talk to each other. If we have a customer, what's happening with that customer, what are the terms of a contract that have been negotiated, or what is the litigation strategy that has been adopted in one country, just to make sure that the organization has one face with that customer and we are not taking contrary stands. So those would be, some of the areas where we have found digitization to be very helpful. And I would not say that, one area is more important than others. It has just made life very much easier for, especially for in-house counsels, I would say, because headcount is an issue. It will continue to be an issue. And if we have these digitization systems in place, we are more self-reliant rather than running to law firms for all kind of works. With the cost constraints that we have, with the headcount constraints we have, I think digitization is just the way to go, especially for the corporate world.
Thank you so much, Sanjay. I don't think we have much of time for the discussion today, though. Very interesting topic that we would definitely, given a choice, like I think we can discuss the whole day. So I would like to thank each and every one of you. I'd like to thank the audience for having us here, and I'd like to thank all the panelists for taking time and sharing your thoughts with all of us. And my special thanks to the ET Legal World to giving us this platform and this opportunity. And a big thank you for all the corporates and the technicians, engineers who are working relentlessly day and night to make the digital India dream. So thank you all once again. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rajesh, for very well moderating, and it's been a pleasure to share this.
Thank you very much.